Hello. Hi, my name is James Fairbairn. I'm the President of Fluoride Free WA. I really appreciate you all coming along today. I know there's lots of distractions out there in Northbridge with giants and jugglers and Lord knows what, as well as traffic chaos, so you've made the effort today and I really do appreciate that. Now before I introduce our guest speaker, I'd just like to say a few words of thanks, because putting on an event like this, I'm sure you can imagine, is a big thing logistically and not inexpensive either. So first of all, I'd like to thank our really valued sponsors. We've got four organisations which help contribute towards this event today, and it would not have been possible without their help. Our gold sponsor is Pure Water Systems. Pure Water Systems is Australia's #1 domestic water purification specialist. They're an Australian-owned and operated water purification and filtration specialist. They only stock premium quality water purifiers, especially manufactured to suit Australian water quality. Liam and Lewis from Pure Water Systems are here today, as I'm sure you've probably met them out the front, and will help advise you on how to remove fluoride out of your drinking water completely. Feel free to come over and have a chat with them or make an appointment with them for a free home consultation. They also have fluoride-free water available to try for yourself out the front. Our first silver sponsor was Organic on Charles, who have been a long-time supporter of Fluoride Free WA. Organic on Charles is a store in North Perth that specialises in organic food. They sell a wide range of fully certified organic fruit and vegetables, as well as groceries. They also have a juice bar, making fresh juices and smoothies with all organic ingredients. And they're at 299 Charles Street, North Perth. Hello. Our second silver sponsor is USANA. USANA is a science-based nutritional health company with a vision of a world free from pain and suffering from degenerative disease. USANA research scientists have identified fluoride as the most electronegative and reactive of all the elements, and strongly encourage its removal from public drinking water. John and Bev from USANA are both here today. Actually, you'll have met them as you came in, giving in your tickets, and are both happy to take your questions. And our third silver sponsor is Michael Brothers Traditionally Pressed Juice, a raw and cold pressed juice company operating from the Swan Valley in WA. They supply the best tasting and healthiest locally sourced fruit and vegetable juices to cafes and independent supermarkets around Perth. The two brothers grew up on fresh produce, pure rainwater and clean air on a broad acre farm in the middle of the wheat belt. And no, there was certainly no fluoride in their water, and yet they all have perfect teeth and no fillings to prove it. So I'd like to just give a round of applause to our three experts. A few other quick words of thanks as well. First up to the Fluoride Free WA team, who many of you have met out front. Hayley, Anne, Bev, John, Gaz and Chris, who are absolutely vital in the operation of our campaign. I'd also especially like to thank Alyssa here at the front, who's very kindly volunteered to video today's event so we can get it onto YouTube later and you can watch over and over again to your heart's content. I'd also like to thank Derek over here, who's helped me set up Fluoride Free WA a few years ago now. I've had to step back to focus on a few other things, but really appreciate it, and so we wouldn't be standing here today if it hadn't been for Derek's help. A number of politicians I'd just like to say thanks to. Ian Britzer, MLA, Vince Catania, MLA, Graham Jacobs, MLA, and particularly Peter Abetz, MLA, who's here at the front today. The way we're going to end water fluoridation is through the parliamentary process, and without these four excellent politicians assisting us and guiding us and giving us sterling advice, I'd say we'd be a long way off our achievement, but it's really, really appreciated, and thank you for coming on, Peter. In the medical sphere, Dr. Peter Dingle, Dr. David Norcross, Dr. Michael Chong have all been very, very supportive, and I urge you, particularly with David and Michael, have their own amalgam-free dental practices, and we'll be posting their details on our Facebook page soon, so do track them down. My long-suffering wife Stephanie at the front here, who has hardly seen me over the last few weeks, so I've been preparing for all this, and especially Dr. Paul Connett, who's come all the way from New York State, USA, to be with us today. So, Without further ado, let me introduce you properly to Dr. Connett. Dr. Paul Connett is a graduate of Cambridge University, where, amongst others, as well as studying, he once played football with John Cleese of Monty Python. As refrained to say who was a better footballer. He holds a PhD in chemistry from Dartmouth College. Since 1983, he taught chemistry at St Lawrence University, Canton, New York State. We've got feedback there. If I don't move, maybe it will stop. Maybe it's my phone. Maybe my phone is there. Okay. And he specialised in environmental chemistry and toxicology. He retired in May 2006, and over the past 30 years, his research on water fluoridation and waste management has taken him to 49 states in the US, 7 provinces in Canada, and 62 other countries worldwide, where he has given over 2,500 pro bono public presentations. Paul has researched the literature on fluoride's toxicity and the fluoridation debate for nearly 20 years, and he helped found the Fluoride Action Network. He's given invited presentations on the dangers of fluoridation to legislative and research bodies and local communities in Australia, Canada, Germany, Ireland, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, the UK and the USA. This has included invited presentations in 2003 to both the US EPA and the US National Research Council. In 2010, with 2 other authors, he published the book The Case Against Fluoride, which contains 80 pages of citations to the scientific literature. As of this month, there has yet to be a scientifically referenced response to Paul's book. Despite being challenged many times to do so, very few of those who are championing fluoridation in government agencies or professional bodies have been prepared to publicly debate Professor Connett on water fluoridation. This, coupled with their failure to respond to the book he co-authored, makes it puzzling why they continue to claim that he misrepresents the scientific data on this subject. Such a charge should be easy to establish in an open public debate, and even easier in a carefully considered rebuttal of the arguments in his book. So without further ado, I'd like to put your hands together for Professor Paul Connett.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. Thank you, James, for organising, and Stephanie, and all the others, and John, and Beverly, I'm staying with. Lovely house. Thank you all for coming. Thank you especially to Peter. I well remember the meeting I had with you in the Parliament the last time I was here, and the excellent luncheon meeting we had with the MPs, and your advice enabled us, I think, to get a very good hearing at that meeting. So, how many people have heard me before? That would be interesting for me. And how many people haven't? Well, that's excellent. Okay, I'm always frightened of boring people when I know they've already heard me before. So just to give you an outline, the worst thing that we can do is to overwhelm people. It's much better for you to know a few subjects well, or a few issues well, than to know a lot not well. So I'm going to focus particularly on neurotoxicity today, because that is the reason, I think, the main reason that fluoridation should be stopped. But before I do that, I'm going to go through the general arguments. So as you've already heard, I've been doing this for 19 years. My wife got me involved. When I began, I was a professor of chemistry, specializing in environmental chemistry and toxicology. I didn't want the issue. I was extremely busy, as James has pointed out, talking about waste all over the world. And that was difficult to do that and maintain a full-time professorship teaching chemistry. So I didn't want a third issue. And I certainly didn't want a third issue which would stigmatize me as Looney Tunes. But when I read the literature that my wife had gathered together from activists around the country, I was both shocked and quite humbled, because I had obviously succumbed to the prevailing notion, the self-serving prevailing notion peddled by the promoters of fluoridation, that the people opposed to fluoridation were a bunch of nitwits, crazies, flat earth society. And we still get the mainstream media trying to peddle this same idea. But I didn't want to be stigmatized that way as a professor of chemistry. Anyway, I couldn't do anything else but campaign against this nonsense once I had seen the facts. Now, my effort really culminated in 2010, as you heard, with the publication of this book. And the best thing I think I've done in 19 years, in addition to talking to the National Research Council, that was very important in 2003, was selecting these two guys as co-authors. This is James Beck, MD and a PhD, retired professor of physics in Calgary. And you'll be happy to know that with this book under his arm, he went on to get fluoridation out of Calgary. That was 1.2 million people liberated. And I do think that this book helped that. And the second author, Spedding Micklem, a doctor, he got his doctorate in biology from Oxford, and he taught immunology at Edinburgh University, also retired. So here we had a retired professor of physics, retired professor of chemistry, and a retired professor of biology. And it's useful being retired because then you have the time to read everything. And I thought that this book would raise the level of debate. As you've heard, it's backed up with 80 pages of references. Everything is referenced. We understate the issue, not overstate it. And that's largely because of the influence of my two co-authors. I tend to be a little bit shooting from the hip. They are less so. They're very much more restrained, and that's made a good combination. Well, shortly after this book was published, I was in New Zealand, and I was invited to give a presentation to the Ministry of Health in New Zealand. And I was only expecting 2 or 3 people at this meeting. In fact, there were 20, all gathered around in this relatively small room to hear what I had to say in this book. And I went through everything, and at the end I said, look, you know, for 3 opponents of fluoridation, we've done everything that you can expect from scientists opposed to fluoridation. We've made our arguments completely transparent. We've documented everything. We've given you all the references. I said, now you, as an agency, are promoting fluoridation in New Zealand. You're very avid about how good this is. I said, my challenge to you is to get your staff to go through this book, chapter by chapter, and show where we're wrong. And if you can't do that scientifically, then you should abandon the promotion of this practice. Well, I think you could probably guess what happened. Nothing. Nothing in 5 years from this ministry in response to this book. And yet we have the Minister of Health in New Zealand going on public television and saying that the opponents of fluoridation are misrepresenting the literature. Without one example, of course. They never give examples, they just make these blanket charges, and for people who don't know the issue, it often sticks. But that really stuck in my throat, this notion that the ministry, after 5 years with all the civil servants at their disposal and all the budget at their disposal, couldn't come up with one scientific response to this book, and yet their minister goes on television, primetime television, and tells everybody that opponents misrepresent the literature. And I've just stated that. So basically what you discover very quickly is that fluoridation is not something that they can defend scientifically, and not something that they will defend scientifically with anybody in the room that knows something about the issue, like myself. And it's fossilized into a belief system. The simplest thing to say is that most of the dentists who promote this, and most of the professional bodies promote this, most of the health agencies that promote this, it's a belief system. They believe in fluoridation because that's what they were taught at dental school and possibly at medical school, and they haven't had the time ever since to really study the issue objectively. So they keep peddling the same stuff. Well, so here are the arguments that I'm going to go through against fluoridation this afternoon. Let's summarize them. It is unusual. Fluoridation is an unusual practice. It is an unnatural process. It is an unethical process. It is an unnecessary process. It is an unsafe process. It is ineffective. And most importantly, there are better ways to fight tooth decay, particularly in low-income families. And I shall give you an example from Scotland, which is not fluoridated, but is having great success reducing tooth decay in low-income families. So that's the agenda, and I'm going to go through those one at a time. Fluoridation is unusual. Most countries in the world, the vast majority of countries, do not fluoridate their water. Most of the countries that fluoridate their water are Anglo-American, they're English-speaking. It's Canada, it's the United States, it's England, it's Ireland, it's New Zealand, it's Australia. A virtual handful of countries. And as you've probably seen in the literature put out by this group, 97% of the Western European population does not drink fluoridated water. And yes, 4 or 5 countries, 4 listed here, do fluoridate their salt. But the point is that the majority of European countries neither fluoridate their salt nor their water. These, incidentally, I can't see it from this angle. I did look up to see if there were any other countries that are fluoridating their salt that don't fluoridate their water. And Austria, we knew, is on that list. France, Germany, and Switzerland are on that list. Spain actually also fluoridates about 10% of its water supply, but I'm happy to say there's a very active movement now in Basque Country to end at least a chunk of that. And we have an addition, which I haven't mentioned before, Slovakia and the Czech Republic fluoridate their salt. The Czech Republic was fluoridating its water, but they stopped. However, despite that information, the World Health Organization, which collects the data, if you look at their data of tooth decay in 12-year-olds, you find that tooth decay is coming down as fast in non-fluoridated countries as fluoridated ones. Now, non-fluoridated ones. Now, if you were a true believer in fluoridation, you say, oh, look at these. You see all these countries here? Look, they're all fluoridated. And look how their tooth decay is coming down. And if you wanted to, you could go to the parents of children in the 1980s, and you could look at their teeth and compare it with their children or their grandchildren in the 2000s, and they'd say, look, how successful this has been. My teeth are rotten. I've had people tell me that my teeth are rotten. I'm like, they're fine. And they assume that the big difference is that their water is fluoridated. Well, before they have too much fun with that, you have to show them this picture, which is the tooth decay in 12-year-olds, the same measurement, again, World Health Organization data, coming down over the same period. And if you put them all together, it's a wash. They're coming down as fast, the tooth decay is coming down as fast in non-fluoridated as fluoridated. And if you look at this period between 2000 and 2005, you're hard pushed to work out which of those symbols represent fluoridated or non-fluoridated countries. So, it's an unusual practice. Next, fluoridation is unnatural. It tickles me how many times the promoters of fluoridation use the word natural. Natural. Fluoride is naturally occurring. Fluoride is naturally in your water. We're just topping it up a little bit. We're just doing more for, if you like, for nature. But I'd like to stress, in fact, in Australia, the Victorian Australian Dental Association actually had a pamphlet which said fluoridation, nature thought of it first. So did nature think of giving fluoride to people first? No. what the promoters are doing with this obsession with the word natural is to confuse geology with biology. How much fluoride you have in your water is a vagary of which rocks the water has flown from. Nature had nothing to do with the rocks. The rocks came first. Evolution or biology came afterwards. And evolution and biology had to work with what was there. And what was there in the primeval slurps, the oceans, was fluoride. In the sea, the average level of fluoride is 1.5 parts per million. So now how natural then is fluoride? Because there's life evolving from the sea. How much fluoride did nature put into the mammal, into the human being in this evolutionary process? And the answer is none. There's not one single biological process in the human body or any mammalian body that requires fluoride. They are all happily going on without fluoride. So why are we exposing our bodies to something that nature could not find a use for? So let's continue. So the first clue is that nature says, I can't find any use for this, this particular element. Let's go on. I've mentioned that already. I should also add, just because something occurs naturally doesn't make it safe. Asbestos occurs naturally, arsenic occurs naturally. And of course, millions of people have had their lives ruined by natural fluoride. In India, China, parts of Iran, parts of Mexico, we have high natural levels. So, what is nature's verdict on the fluoride ion? Well, this was the fact in 1996, which made me realize there was something wrong with this practice. Because the best guide of what nature thinks about fluoride is the level that she put into mother's milk. And it's extremely low, extremely low, if there's any there at all. The average levels is 0.004 parts per million, milligrams per litre. Now, just to put that into perspective, we fluoridate at about 1 part per million, about. It ranges from 0.6 around the world to 1.2. So this is extremely low. And what do we deduce from that? This means that the bottle-fed baby in a fluoridated community is getting between 175 and 300 times the fluoride that nature intended. This is reckless. This is, in my view, utterly reckless. Mother's milk protects our babies from early exposure to fluoride. Now, whether she intended that or not, or whether it's some complete accident, that is the reality. Mother's milk protects your baby from fluoride. And what water fluoridation does is remove that protection. I think we should win that. The argument against fluoridation right there. Right there. Especially when people are spouting the word natural, natural, natural. That is nature's verdict. That is nature's verdict. And removing that protection from our babies is reckless. And now we're finding out just how reckless it is. Not just the fact now we have over 50% of our kids in America have dental fluorosis, which is the first sign of overexposure to fluoride, the first sign of fluoride's toxicity. But it's now clear, there's overwhelming evidence, which I should be going into, that when you see this damage to the teeth, you've probably got an indication that your baby's mental development has also been harmed. And that's the shocker. And if this didn't stop it in principle, this fact didn't stop it, then surely finding out that we may be threatening our baby's mental development, who could possibly justify that? I mean, teeth are important, but surely they're not more important than our children's brains. But I shall go into the details of that scientific evidence, because there's been quite a bit since I was here a year ago. So the third argument is fluoridation is unethical. Why is it unethical? We should never use the public water supply to deliver any medical treatment. Any medical treatment. And the fact is, we haven't. Since we started fluoridation in 1945 in the United States, we have never, ever used anywhere in the world the public water supply to deliver any other medicine. But watch out, because people are now advocating putting lithium into the drinking water to reduce suicide rates and putting statins in the water to reduce something else. So they're out there. But the world has never succumbed to this. The only place where we've succumbed to this clumsy method of delivering medicine is with fluoridation. The odd one out. And the obvious reasons why you don't use the public water supply to deliver medicine is obvious. One is you can't control the dose. The dose depends upon how much water you drink and how much fluoride you're getting from other sources as well. It's the total dose in milligrams per day that's going to hurt you, if it hurts you at all. The concentration is not the right indicator. And it's very interesting that promoters of fluoridation consistently and constantly confuse concentration and dose. Concentration, they can control at the waterworks. What they can't control is the dose. The second reason is you can't control who gets this medicine. It means it goes to everybody. And now we know it shouldn't go to babies. And it shouldn't go to people with iodine deficiency. And it shouldn't go to people with poor kidney function who can't get rid of the fluoride. So again, very, very clumsy way of delivering medicine. And then thirdly, it violates the individual's right to informed consent to medication. And it surprises me that the medical community has gone along with their dental colleagues, probably because they're friends with them at the golf club. But why so many doctors turn a blind eye to that principle, which is very important. You go to the website of any medical association in the world, and they should have a statement of what informed consent means. And what it means is a doctor, when they give a medicine to somebody, is obliged to tell them what it's for, what the side effects are, give you as much information as you can, and then the patient is supposed to determine whether they're going to drink this or eat this medicine. And if a doctor would use unnecessary pressure to force somebody to do this, they could lose their license. To summarize water fluoridation then, what a massive, massive violation of ethics it is. The whole community, or in some cases the whole state, like Victoria or Ireland, is doing to everyone what an individual doctor is not allowed to do to anyone. Force medication on them. And what's the response to that? It's so weak, it makes you want to cry. They say, well, you don't have to drink the water. All we do is deliver it to the tap. It's up to you whether you drink it. Well, say that to a family of low income. It's up to you whether you drink the water. It's up to you whether your kids drink water. It's up to you whether you use the tap water to make a baby formula. They don't have that option, which adds to the lack of ethics of this practice. And what adds to this is that the people that are prescribing this medication, the vast majority have no medical qualifications. The the people that we elect to office. We don't elect them to office because they're doctors. So we're having this prescription given to us by people with no medical training. No agency is monitoring side effects. You know, back in 1991, the National Health and Medical Research Council, and if you don't know who those people are, they're a bunch of hand-picked robots who endorse the public health policies of the Australian government. In 1991, the National Health and Medical Research Council recommended two things. They said there are recurring stories from individuals that they are super sensitive to fluoride. And whilst there's no evidence for that, there's these anecdotal reports, it's beholden on the government to actually study this. Try to put this on a scientific level where you take these people, some of them who will volunteer, to study them scientifically, you know, double-blind studies, all that things, to see what happens when they are given fluoride or not given fluoride in placebos and so on. 1991. No health agency in Australia has ever attempted to do that. And they still claim that nobody in Australia is sensitive to fluoride. There's no agency, health agency in Australia, and when I say Australia, I'm not picking on you guys. I would, because I love cricket. There's no agency in Australia that is monitoring our exposure to fluoride. There's no agency taking urine tests, blood tests, nail tests, hair tests, bone tests, to see how much fluoride we're actually being exposed to on a daily basis, and a month by month, year by year. How much fluoride is accumulating in our bones? We're flying blind. And in 1991, the NHMRC also recommended that the government collect fluoride bone samples so that they could put any epidemiological study on a sound scientific footing, knowing the dose that people were getting, like the exposure that people were getting. Have they done that? Not one single measurement has been made in the bones of Australians since that time, to the best of my knowledge. And yes, and so it goes on.